Welcome to the CCG Museum for this short terminology video. In this series, intended for newcomers to the CCG hobby, we explain basic terms one may commonly encounter. For today's video, we will be discussing Deckmaster. No, this video isn't about the fastening system by Grabber Construction Products. We're talking about the branding label used by Wizards of the Coast. Anyone who has spent any time in the CCG hobby has definitely seen, and probably played, Magic the Gathering at some point. Even if you feel it's not for you, you have some familiarity with it. The card back design for Magic is iconic. I couldn't comment on what the whippersnappers of today think about it, or if they think it looks dated and archaic, the way I probably would have if it had been designed in the 1960s. But to me, it's an incredible work of art. It has a simple overall design, but by using marbled gradients, it keeps your eyes interested in it longer than simple solid colors would. Sorry, Super Deck, I do love your card back design, but I have to admit it isn't as good as Magic's. The dots of color forming a circle hints at gameplay, and the original Magic the Gathering logo is still leagues better than any of the redesigns they've come up with since. I said what I said. If you disagree, you can fight me. There is, however, one element that often gets ignored, an odd part of the design that doesn't quite fit. There's a little plaque towards the bottom that says Deckmaster. What's going on with that? Well, let's take a quick look at Wizards of the Coast's other early CCGs. Well, they apparently dropped it fairly quickly. What was going on here? I mean, even back in the day, a lot of gamers were confused by the Deckmaster logo, if they thought of it at all. The magazines of the time rarely mentioned Deckmaster, if ever. Some people speculated that it was meant to represent gameplay mechanics similar to that of Magic. That explanation would make sense if all of the Deckmaster games had similar gameplay, but they don't. Magic and Vampire do have some similarities, but Netrunner couldn't be more different. And some later games like Battletech and especially the Arc System games are very similar to Magic the Gathering, but they don't have the Deckmaster logo. Well, the answer is deceptively simple. You need to remember that Magic was the very first collectible card game. While Wizards couldn't see the future, they still understood two things about their new game. One, they had something completely unique on their hands. And two, they were going to want to make more games like it. So they came up with a brand for this new type of game, the Deckmaster brand. If you're thinking that makes Deckmaster seem as if it was essentially the name Wizards of the Coast came up with to mean collectible card game, then you are correct. Although perhaps I should say trading card game, since that's the term preferred by Wizards. Now, of course nobody can control the terminology other people use, though you can make suggestions and hope they get picked up. Unfortunately, Wizards had several problems with Deckmaster. First was the fact that competitors immediately started making their own Deckmaster-style games. But since Deckmaster was a Wizards of the Coast brand name, said competitors couldn't legally use that term. But CCG, TCG, and similar terms were all generic, so other companies could embrace those with open arms. The coming market flood of CCGs, almost none of them being referred to as a Deckmaster game, would ensure the irrelevance of the term. Second was the fact that collectible card game and trading card game as terms are so much more descriptive than Deckmaster. Imagine telling someone that you play Deckmaster games. It would have made just as little sense back in the 90s as it does today. But tell somebody that you play collectible card games, and even somebody who doesn't actually know what that means will at least get an idea of what you're talking about. Finally, there was the fact that Wizards of the Coast themselves used the term trading card game quite a bit, and as far as I can tell, they didn't really ever refer to Deckmaster much at all, though I admit my Duelist collection is still quite small, so perhaps I simply haven't run across some of the existing examples. But I doubt it. I mean, just look at their patent for Magic the Gathering. They called it a trading card game style of play, not a Deckmaster game style of play. It's pretty hard to promote a brand name you don't actually use. After a few years, Wizards of the Coast realized there was no point in putting the Deckmaster brand on any of their games. Heck, Battletech is usually considered to be a Deckmaster game by old-time CCGers, but the card backs didn't include the branding, and that didn't hurt the game's sales one bit. And that's really all there is to it. At first, they thought they needed a name for this new type of game and came up with one. Then they realized they didn't need it, so they stopped using it. At least with their newer games. Magic had been using it for years already by that point, so they had to keep using it there because getting rid of that logo would mean making older cards incompatible with newer cards, which would royally piss off the player base. I believe that's the same reason they changed their minds on giving Arabian Nights its proposed card back. Occasionally, Wizards of the Coast will come out with a redesign of Magic's card backs for various reasons, and those designs always get rid of the Deckmaster branding. Heck, even some of the digital versions of Magic removed the Deckmaster logo. There is one more tiny thing of note about the Deckmaster logo. You will have noticed that the 3 official Deckmaster games had slightly different logos meant to fit thematically with each game. When you look at Magic's logo, it might not be immediately obvious how it fits. It's mostly blue with a little splash of darker blue, or maybe it's purple. I don't know, I'm not a color expert. In discussions online I've seen, a lot of people believe that to be a pin marking on the logo. This belief was unfortunately started when Mark Rosewater himself, on his personal blog, mistakenly claimed that it was an uncaught error that went to print. But the truth of the matter, according to the original art director Jesper Meerfors, is that the background of the logo was created with the same system that was used to create the borders of the fronts of blue cards. Personally, that's what I had always assumed. It seemed pretty obvious to me, but I was a fairly early adopter of Magic. Mid to late 1994, I don't remember the exact month. Wizards of the Coast changed the design of the borders on the front of cards with 8th edition in 2003. So people who started playing Magic after then might not be able to make the connection, since they would be unfamiliar with what is by now an ancient card layout. So now you know what the Deckmaster logo is all about. Thank you for attending this terminology lesson. Please let us know in the comments what you thought of the video and what terms you might like us to explain in the future. Have fun out there, and always remember to cut the deck.